Hello, everyone, and good morning. Welcome to our live feed update for September 18th. I'm your host, Taran Armstrong, and I'm here today to update you on everything that happened yesterday on the Big Brother 26 live feeds. It was day 64 in the house, and the votes are flipping, maybe? I don't know. We're going to talk about it, and with me to talk about it is Cory. How you doing, Cory?
I'm doing all right, Taran. I mean, last week we talked about my trauma, Quinn's being evicted, but we got through it. And this week there's a twist at the final 8 and 2 vetoes. So, I apologize to all the listeners, but this is going to be less live feed update and more therapy session, but I hope it's interesting enough to listen to.
Yes. Okay. Well, as you all know, of course, Leah, the HOH, nominated Chemo and Rubina. Angela then won the veto, used it on Chemo, and Leah replaced Chemo with T-Core. Not necessarily with the intention of targeting T-Core, mostly as a pawn, not realizing that the votes could theoretically actually be there to evict T-Core. As soon as T-Core touched the block, MJ was like, "Well, why don't we just vote her out? She's right there." And Leo was like, "I mean, that sounds like a good idea if the votes are there." And so Angela, of course, is down for that as well, which means that the thing to find out right now, today, day 64, is where does Cam stand? And can this vote flip against T-Core actually go through?
Yeah, it's where does Cam stand, and then how strongly does Chelsie stand in the I want to keep T core camp? Because both
Mm,
of these questions are going to determine what Cam's going to do. And I think we actually got a pretty decent answer to both these questions.
I think we did for the most part. Yes. So we started the day with Angela talking to Rubina. And another question was like, are the nominees going to campaign at all? And Rubina kind of answered that question fairly quickly. Talking to Angela, Angela was kind of like, hey, I'm sorry I didn't use the veto on you. You know, I felt really bad about it. But hey, I really want you to stay. Um, I would want you to stay over T-Core. And Rubina's kind of like, I've resigned myself to the idea of I will have to campaign a little bit against my best friend T-Core. And that campaign, I think part of the way that Rubina is able to maybe justify it in her head, at least initially, is, it's just about how great and amazing T-Core is. She's such an amazing person. In fact, she's too amazing, right? Like, she's a little too good. She's kind of a bigger threat than me, right? Like, she's gonna win in the final 2. She's, like, gonna be harder to take out. I just feel like, she's just so great, like, too great.
I can't express how much I appreciate Rubina campaigning. Above and beyond more than I would expect. I just wish she knew a little bit more what she was campaigning for, because she starts off this conversation being like, Cam's off the table. We don't have Cam. We can't get that vote. We need to flip Chemo. And Cam is upstairs having a conversation about flipping his vote. Like, again, I love the effort. I'm here for it. I always thought Rubina, okay, when I say I always thought she had potential, as time goes on, I think there's less and less potential. But whatever potential there is, I feel like we're seeing it, and I love that.
Yes. There is discussion about trying to get Chemo. In Rubina's mind, Chemo should want her to stay. And she's right. He should. I mean, for the game, it does make more sense for Chemo that Rubina stays, at least to some degree. This may be an argument you could say that at this point, T-Core might actually be a bigger shield in front of him, considering how many people are trying to potentially take T-Core out over. I don't think so, though. I don't think they vote Tico out over Chemo, in which case it is probably best, straight up best for Chemo to keep Rubina. But either way, in her mind, it's that this does make more sense for Chemo's game, even though he may be leaning in the other direction. So she thinks that there's a chance they can maybe get Chemo on board.
Yeah, and her strategy to get Chemo on board is using Angela as her proxy. She's Angela, can you campaign? I guess it's probably because of the veto. Maybe Angela has a certain amount of leverage over Chemo. I 99% of seasons, I would say that would not be the case. I feel like using a veto on someone, it doesn't buy you that much goodwill, especially when your relationship isn't that close. On this season, it's a lot. Angela is getting vetoes used on her, so she has to use a veto on someone else. And Chemo is talking about, I don't want to put up Angela because I feel like I owe her something. So I feel like, I don't know if you feel the same way, Taran. I've had to throw out a lot of what I know about Big Brother for this season because it feels like they're playing by different rules.
Certainly. I mean, I think that I think that the fundamentals are still there. It's just that, like, at the end of the day, Big Brother is never like hard and fast when it comes to rules. Like, there's no solid. This just always works. This just always doesn't work. We like to talk about the things that tend to work or the things that generally give you the best odds. But Big Brother is so much more poker than it is, chess, right? So you can do everything right and still lose. You can do everything wrong and still win, and that's just kind of how it goes. And this season, a lot of people are doing wrong, and so it's and again, like, wrong, right? So it's like, it's interesting. It's interesting. And this idea that Angela could influence Chemo, I'm not sure that Angela would have influence over Chemo. However, it is worth pointing out that Chemo has expressed that he does feel like he owes her one, and would be hesitant to put her on the block next week because of that. So at the very least, she has bought a little bit of leeway with Chemo, at the very least, which is useful.
Yeah. Again, like, happy that Rubina is campaigning. The biggest conversation she had today was with Angela. The next closest is with T-Core, who's on the block next to her. So a lot of the campaign and a potential flip is kind of happening around her, but she's definitely putting the most effort in of the two nominees thus far.
Mm. Yes. So Leah is going to talk to Cam. And it was asked me yesterday, has Leah told Cam yet that T-Core was trying to get Cam on the block? And the answer was no, until this conversation, which happened yesterday after the update, of course, where Leah tells Cam, hey, just so you know, T-Core was basically pitching for you to go up on the block, for me to go against the deal and get you on the block. And Cam was like, oh, wow, well, T-Core needs to go.
I was kind of sounding the alarms this conversation. I thought Leo might be pushing a little bit too hard because while Cam was pretty open to the idea of maybe we should vote out T-Core, he kept talking about we got to get Chelsie on board though.
Yes.
That's key. And then Leah's like, I don't know if I trust Chelsie, and Cam's like, I hear that, I do, but I trust Chelsie. And they kept going back and forth for a while. And I think that's when something I certainly struggled with. You have to be a very active listener because pushing against that brick wall is not going to get you anywhere. In fact, it might like just incentivize Cam to run to Chelsie and kind of spoil the flip. It doesn't seem like we're there yet. But Cam was, I want to say, surprisingly open to the idea, but it shouldn't come as a surprise because it's the best move for him by a country mile.
Yes. And there have been indications that he'd be willing to do this in the past. So, but even though there have also been indications that he might be reluctant to do this. It was a little bit up in the air what he might want to actually do. And it was not entirely certain how honest he was being in this conversation, considering how much Leah was pushing it and how much it would be very easy for Cam to just kind of agree with it in the moment, but use this excuse of, well, we need to get Chelsie on board as a way to potentially get out of it. And also, like, how adamant is he in this decision, even if he is leaning in this direction, considering the fact that he wants to get Chelsie on board? Does that mean that even if he isn't just placating right now, he genuinely does lean in this direction, that Chelsie could still very easily pull him back into the other direction? And it makes sense, right? Like, obviously, it's much better for Cam if Chelsie agrees with this decision and is on board, and he doesn't have to, blindside her with a vote or go against her wishes in this vote and potentially further alienate her, considering the situation they are already in. That's not great for Cam if he has to do it in that way. And so that's what he says. Leah, of course, is not really sure that Chelsie will be getting on board. They talk about Chelsie a little bit, as you mentioned, Cory, that Leah pushing against Chelsie a bit. Cam does admit he has started to lose some trust in Chelsie after all this drama, but ultimately defending her, saying again that he wants to get her on board. Um, Leah says she thinks that Chelsea's going to keep T-Core though, because that's what's good for Chelsie, right? They stay up late talking to each other. Like I think that's going to be how things go. There is, it does feel a little bit unresolved by the end of this conversation.
I think something to track in this conversation is this is the first time Cam has kind of had the women's alliance confirmed to him or
Yes.
the rumblings of a women's alliance, which you might say seems not that important. Leah's pushing for T-Core, Rubina T-Core on the block. But I think it is really important for Cam, weirdly, his relationship with Chemo, because
Mm.
Cam walks away from this conversation saying, I need to talk to Chemo and form some sort of arrangement, despite seemingly them both targeting each other for a while now. And not to look too far ahead, because this happens probably every live feed update for at least 5 to 10 minutes. Cam's jury prospects, where there's a ton of women on the jury, all talking about the idea of having a woman as a winner. I think that little bit of doubt, that little bit of fear, getting to the end with someone he'd think he would beat otherwise, is probably starting to creep in. So he was very kind of like startled by it, and I don't know exactly how that's going to change what he does moving forward.
Yes, later in the night, he's still talking about Chemo as a primary target for him. I'm not sure how much this would change, but like he has been after Chemo for a while. It is certainly possible that that this gets in his head a little bit and changes his mind. For now, I'm not sure it has a ton yet, but we will certainly see. And yes, they did talk about this. Leah kind of being like, they want this women's alliance, but like, what? 6 women can't make it to the final two. So, very much doing the like, yeah, those other women can.
Well, it's the logic is pretty astounding because the way that she kind of flips Cam on T Core, I don't know how much you really even needed to flip him necessarily, is saying T Core said she was all in on the women's alliance. And obviously that's a lie because that means getting rid of Chemo, who's her number one ally, which landed pretty hard for Cam, or at least Cam pretended like it landed very hard. I do think it's kind of genius. There's this women's alliance, and you're saying that T-Core's theoretical devotion to the women's alliance is the red flag when it's really Leah who, let's be real, no one is in on this women's alliance, right? No one's ruining it. No one's okay. That's important because I think people online are annoying about that type of stuff. But that was a lot of the argument, and it just felt kind of a weird path to go down, but I guess it worked.
Yes. So with Cam basically indicating to Leah that he is leaning in this direction, it now seems like, if we're looking at the flip meter, it's leaning a little bit in the T-Core direction right now. MJ is locked in. Angela is locked in. And Cam is leaning in that direction. We don't even know yet exactly how Chelsie feels. We have we suspect that she is heavily leaning toward keeping T-Core, but she is not campaigning or locked into the degree that MJ and Angela are yet. And we don't even yet fully know where Chemo stands in all of this. Nobody's made an actual pitch to Chemo about the vote quite yet either. And he's certainly not actively campaigning for T-Core to stay either. So there's a lot of push and momentum in the keep Rubina camp right now, and a lot of stagnation in the keep T-Core camp.
Yeah, and it was very visible in the backyard. Like you're allowed to
Yeah.
have private conversations in the sense of you can't hear each other necessarily, but later in the night, T Core is talking about every conversation she saw, and she's basically doing her own live feed update without the details.
Yeah.
And I think if you're Chelsie, if you're T Core, even if you're Chelsie and like got an indication later, even if you didn't, you still would know something's up. This could not be a blindside, or if it is a blindside, it would be a masterfully conducted blindside.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's again, Janky World is rearing its ugly head every day. It's happening.
Yeah. So MJ talks to Rubina and lets her know that she wants her to stay and that her and Cam will be trying to keep her, will be voting to keep her this week. Um, She already feels like Cam is on board, like Cam is gonna be a vote to keep her. We already know that Cam is talking to Leah about this. And Rubina also makes the pitch. Like, I think that's the smarter move. T-Core's the bigger threat. If you don't get her out now, you may never be able to. And MJ agrees with this. They talk about chemo as the option, another option for the vote. Again, Rubina feels like chemo might want to keep her because that is the better play, even though she's not sure where he stands right now. But Chelsie probably not looking to keep Rubina. And MJ is not shy about saying that straight up to Rubina. Like, I don't think Chelsie wants you to stay over T-Core. Um, and Rubina's like, well, listen, I'm not going to put you up, MJ. I don't know. I don't know about T-Core. Like, I can't make promises for T-Core. I don't know what she might put you up, MJ. And MJ's like, I know this already. Chelsie knows it too, but she still wants T-Core to stay. So I don't know how I feel about that. And so they talk about like, well, who would you target, Rubina? And they talk a little bit about like Angela being on the block, maybe even put Chelsie up there. I don't know. And MJ's like, well, Rubina, you should talk to Cam and stuff like that. And so it's again, Rubina's really starting to make a pitch here, and MJ is really starting to drift from, at the very least, just being a mindless Chelsie soldier. I think she still wants Chelsie around. I don't think she wants Chelsie gone, but she's definitely aware that Chelsie is looking out for her own interests, which are now she sees opposite to her own. And she's perfectly happy to cut away any of Chelsea's power so that Chelsie becomes more of an MJ minion than the reverse.
It's so, so good to see because I think MJ is a player who the first half of the game didn't really have a shot. She was just kind of out of all information. And I was certain the second she gets into power, she's going to ruin it. She doesn't, she's not a very skilled game player as we saw for the first 6-7 weeks. So I figured when she's in a good position, much like a Quinn is going to figure out a way to spoil it. I think she's done an excellent job since she's been in this better position. Of course, Leah winning HOH is a really good thing for her, but it feels like MJ has solidified her relationship with Leah. She's, as much as she's like going anti-Chelsie and the Cam Chelsie, her drama is annoying. Later in the day, MJ has a really good conversation with Chelsie, which makes it seem, at least to Chelsie, like they're the two.
Yeah.
I think she's doing a great job of playing the field. She seems to me like the most self-interested player who's most actively acting in their self-interest. And I was wrong. I think she's doing a great job.
Yeah, she basically, what's happening is, as long as MJ and Cam are able to take out T-Core this week, they're just trying to supplant. They're both trying to supplant Chelsea's position as riding that middle. We talked about how if T-Core stays, Chelsie gets to be in the middle of two trios. It's like a little bow tie shape. If you looked at the points, and MJ and Cam are like, that's what's going to happen if T-Core stays. We would rather be in that position. And right now, MJ is the more active of the two in trying to actively take that position. MJ is trying to be the one that's like, hey, Rubina, Chelsie, right? And put Chelsie over there, stuck on one side, while MJ gets to still be with Chelsie and Cam on one side, while also being the one that saved Rubina on the other side. Will it work? That's an open question. Cam is also trying to get into this position, though less actively. Though he may have the better relationships, it's not entirely clear yet. So it's interesting.
Yeah, and it's not just the middle of two sides because MJ can play this middle between Chelsie and like Rubina and Chemo and them. She also has one of the best relationships with Leah out of
Yes.
nowhere, where this whole season it's been this saga of they're talking bad about each other behind each other's backs. And it feels like finally with this vote, with them having the same goal, they're back on the same page. It's very interesting, just the duality of Mackenzie versus Cam, because Mackenzie is more actively strategic or is a more active strategic player, and Cam is much better socially. At this point in the game, I am more reassured by strategic conversations than someone chilling and being a good dude. I think
Mm.
MJ is definitely like edging ahead of Cam in that way. Jury votes are a different question, but we'll get there later.
Yes. So Notably, they talk about Leah as well, MJ and Rubina. It's discussed this idea of like what do we do with Leah? Do we put Leah up? MJ says, "I'm not sure I could put Leah up, but I will definitely vote her out if I need to." Which is something that she's kind of been saying for a while, like, "Ooh, I couldn't be the one to go after Leah." I think just based on their history and the relationship that they have. But she's not exactly like actively protecting Leah. In this, like Leah is basically, I would say, in right now it seems in MJ's mind, Leah is kind of like if Chelsie is here, Leah is like here. But they're both valuable to her as allies.
Well, it's a great spot where you have two allies where either one going home gives you a really reasonable path moving
Right.
forward. A lot of the conversation about Leah from the other house guests, there's a lot of talk of we're not going to target her next week. I do think somebody wins HOH and she's a really tempting target. She might be
Yeah.
in that spot where she's almost a little bit scary to talk about. In the same way, it's scary to talk about a Jag or any person who's been winning competitions recently because you take that shot and you miss, you're in a lot of trouble. So I think some people might just be waiting to get their like guaranteed safety before they say, wait a minute, there's no way we're letting Leah get to the end, especially after the trios weekend, which inherently weakens Chelsie. And she's going to be sticking out like a sore thumb as a threat.
I agree. I really do. I think that like because they're gonna have more conversations about who should we target next, and the options will be if you are Cam, MJ, Chelsie, the options are you can go after, assuming T-Core is gone, Rubina and Chemo. And yes, there is some idea that like Chemo is a threat to MJ and Cam. They have been looking to get Chemo out for a while. I do think Chemo will absolutely touch the block. But Chemo might, especially without T-Core, finally start having some conversations and be like, "Yo, I'm not actually after you." Um, and, you know, there are bigger threats, people who have won many more competitions than me. I've won 1 AI arena. Um, Chelsie and Angela combined have won, like, 5 comps. Uh, you're really gonna target me right now and let them compete both in the next HOH at the final 6? Like, there's a pretty strong argument there, and even if Chemo doesn't make the argument himself, you can think it up on your own. Like, it's not a hard argument to think of. In the same way that, like, nobody said they wanted to target Quinn on Quinn's HOH or even after Quinn's HOH until right around the time that the veto happened, and then they were like, "Wait a minute. Quinn's won some comps and he's right there." I do agree. I think that there's Leah should definitely still be very concerned, especially because I think Chelsie is uh, very openly willing to be looking at looking at Leah, and still even after this week would likely have some amount of influence over Cam and MJ to some degree. So uh, certainly something to watch out for.
This is what happens in the end game of Big Brother. When you have a threat on the block, they're going to go home unless they're a masterful player. When you're in a position where you can take the shot at Leah, who at this point has established herself as one of the biggest threats in the house, that shot will be taken. And it's very funny watching these feeds where all these house guests are lying to me because they're all saying, yeah, Angela should go next. We'll keep Leah another round. And I know if both of them are on the block, I know exactly how that vote is going to go. So maybe that's the experience of playing. Maybe it's just the most obvious thing that any of us have ever seen this season. But Leah and Angela Noms seem, if not likely, seem like a real possibility next week.
Hmm. So Chelsie is going to talk to T-Core. And this was very funny because it was happening at roughly the same time that MJ was talking to Rubina, telling Rubina, "Hey, Cam and I are voting to keep you." Chelsea's telling T-Core, "Hey, Cam and I voting to keep you." And having the same conversation. "Hey, I want you to stay. Me and Cam will be working to keep you around." Um, and she encourages T-Core, "You should be talking to Leah. You should be, making your case, repairing some relationships." It does certainly feel as though Chelsie is, um, you know, wanting T-Core to stay. Again, how much is still up in the air, but she's having a similar conversation with T-Core that MJ is having with Rubina. The difference is that MJ has been working on this for a while, has talked to other people, and is very firmly set in. Chelsea's just starting, and she's starting with T-Core and hasn't really talked to anybody else about it yet.
It's very counterintuitive in Big Brother because you'd think maintaining a position or maintaining where a vote is would be easier than flipping a vote. But maintenance is really hard because you feel like you don't have to do anything. You can
Mm,
just sit around instead of actively like running around and talking. So we're keeping T-Core, we're keeping T-Core, we're keeping T-Core, right? Whereas MJ knows she has to have these conversations to flip the vote. So she's the only one actually having any conversations. I think, again, Janky World is kind of helping T-Core a little bit here. And the reason I feel that way is because I think T-Core has more of a idea of what's going on in the house. Otherwise, where she might just be a little bit less aware in a normal Big Brother house where conversations can happen behind closed doors. Because once T-Core finds out that this flip is happening, or more importantly, once Chelsie finds out that this vote flip is happening, which she does very soon, I think she's going to be put back in that MJ position of, okay, now I have to actively flip the vote as opposed to passively maintaining what I think is already happening.
mhm. Yes, and you're right, because part of why Chelsea, I think, has been so lax about this vote is that she does think it's already locked in, and she also believes, falsely, that Angela wants Rubina out. And she tells T-Core this. She's like, "Yeah, I think Angela actively wants Rubina gone and will vote to evict Rubina over you." Of course, she's very wrong about this, and we'll find out relatively soon. But in the meantime, Leah talks to MJ and lets MJ know, "Hey, I talked to Cam and he says he wants T-Core out." And MJ's like, "Exactly. That's perfect. We have the votes. We can do this. T-Core leaving is so good for us." And Leah's like, "I agree, but like, is Rubina coming for me? Like, I'm still concerned about Rubina." Remember, Leah did not intend to send T-Core out when she put T-Core up. She's like, it was a pleasant surprise that people were willing to make this vote flip, but like, I think she's to some degree still wrapping her head around it, thinking like, well, this wasn't really the plan. Rubina was more the plan at this point. So I just want to make sure I'm like crossing my T's and dotting my I's. Like, is Rubina a threat to me? And MJ's like, no, not at all. And MJ doesn't fully believe that. I do think, they talked about Leah. Like, that was a conversation that was had. But MJ, she's keeping things from Leah, which normally I wouldn't really even point out, but like in this house, it's like, hey, look, they're
They're doing
doing
the
it
thing. I think it's a very interesting dynamic about how like HOHs and votes work. Where obviously, as an HOH, you'd think a unanimous vote is the best thing that can happen. You got everyone agreeing they're getting out your target. I think a lot of times what you want is an extremely split vote. So whoever survives has a lot of people to direct their ire at. If Rubina stays unanimously over T-Core, then it puts her in a position where, like, okay, well, Leah just nominated me and got rid of my ally, as opposed to if Chelsie and Chemo are voting out Rubina, Chemo is his own thing, but if Chelsea's voting out Rubina, trying to get her out of the house, then all of a sudden she has a pretty reasonable, clear target. So, in a weird way, I think Leah would like a 3-2 vote a lot more than a house decision.
for sure. Yeah. Um, Because Leah is also concerned about Chelsea, and she says so to MJ. She's uh, in a similar way that she was talking to Cam about Chelsea. Like, she's still worried about Chelsea. And this is starting to get to the point where it's like, yes, this is a thing that will often happen, where like there are Leah and Chelsea, they are destined to go after each other.
Yeah.
It's like, if Chelsea wins HOH, I guarantee you she's going to heavily consider targeting Leah at some point during that HOH, if not just outright do it. And the next time Leah wins, she's going to heavily consider targeting Chelsea again, because one of them is going to be out at some point. They have been looking at it. I mean, Leah was Chelsea's primary target way back in week like 2 when she won her first HOH. Like, these two are destined to go at each other. They're just the two of those people that are like that. And what can often happen in these situations is that Leah is going to be talking a lot like, man, I'm just worried about Chelsie. And, Chelsea's allies, of course, are going to be like, don't worry about Chelsie. It's fine. MJ says, like, hey, with Tikor leaving, Chelsea's not even that powerful anymore. So we don't even need to focus on Chelsie next week. We can focus on some of these other players. And Leah's like, okay, I guess. Like, I guess that makes sense. But they're still happy. They're working together. They're gonna make this move. It's gonna be great. And hey, they can maybe even split up Chemo and Rubina with this vote because Chemo's gonna want Tikor to stay. And how is Rubina gonna feel about that? So like there's still some options moving forward. Like this is good.
Yeah, it's great. And here's the problem. Leah and Chelsie are targeting each other, and Leah was just HOH, and Chelsea's not on the block. So did Leah miss her shot? I don't know. Will Chelsie miss her shot next week? Seems pretty unlikely. As the numbers get down, it becomes easier to fall into the right move. Which I think again, Chelsie wins HOH. It's hard to imagine nominations that make sense that don't include two names, Leah and Angela. So I think Leah is definitely going to be kicking herself if that happens. But again, this season has been determined by wicked, crazy HOH outcomes. So maybe we'll get one of those, and Leah's master plan is going to be made obvious to all of us.
Yes. So Tikor talks to Chemo. We already talked about this conversation a little bit. She's a little worried about people that she's seen be talking throughout the day. Chemo is not as concerned, but Tikor says she wants to talk to Cam primarily. I need to talk to Cam. Sure, that's going to happen. And so they're doing their own thing. And in the meantime, Cam and MJ talk to Chelsie. And they're talking about, like, who are we targeting? And this is late into the night at this point. Who are we gonna target next? Angela or Chemo is, like, the primary discussion at this point. Angela has won more comps, but are they comps that matter? Like, is she actually a threat to win things? Chemo has won a comp, but it's only one. Can Chemo win under pressure? Can Angela win under pressure? Is Chemo coming after them? Is Angela coming after them? So on and so forth. Chelsie mentions, well, hey, I think that Angela wants Rubina out this week. And MJ's like, oh, no, no, no. Angela wants Tikor out. And Chelsea's like, oh, I didn't realize. Okay. Well, what do you, what do you guys want to do this week? Because I figured we are going to go in that direction. And they both are like, yeah, we're kind of thinking Tikor. She's kind of the bigger threat. No, I mean, we talked about this, didn't we? And Chelsea's like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, no, totally. Yep, okay. Yeah, I'm down to vote with the house. That's
Oh my
what you
God,
guys are doing."
Taran, the enigmatic house. I'm going to vote with the house. You're looking at the house. You're talking to the house. It's your allies. It
Yeah.
is so frustrating, but this is dangerous. You're giving Chelsie a chance to campaign. Granted, she's going to campaign to you, so it's in your power to shut it down. Look, it's going to be if Chelsie feels strongly enough to keep Tikor, which we're not sure of. This conversation definitely made it seem like she's okay letting her go, which comports with some stuff we heard before and contradicts other stuff. So again, we have no idea. It's going to be MJ and Chelsie trying to pull Cam. And it seems like a really fun day of feeds, especially considering the dynamics between the two of them. But this conversation, like as informative as it was for Chelsie finding out what the plan was, it wasn't super informative to us because we just have to guess what Chelsea's thinking.
Mhm. Yes. Chelsie saying, I'm down for this if this is what you guys want. Um, the vibe I got was that it is not what she wants. The question then becomes, if that's true, how much does she actually care about what she wants? How much will she push back on this? And how much success can she have pushing back on this? Part of the reason we felt like that Chelsie was in such a good position was because we felt like she had a good hold over MJ and Cam. And right now, it's looking like she may not. So, this is a real test of like her positioning as the front runner is like, can she get her allies back in line with what she needs them to do for her to retain her strong position. And right now, they are not in line. They are elsewhere. And so uh, she says this, I'm okay with this, but she is going to throw some little needle points out here and there throughout the conversation to see if there's any holes to be poked in this plan of taking out T-Core, all of which are promptly defended against in this moment. So not a lot of progress here in the night. MJ says things like, hey, I think that Rubina and Chemo might even split up without T-Core around. And Chelsea's like, no, no, no. I think, in fact, with T-Core gone, they're going to latch onto each other even more, which you can tell is, I think, just a reflective argument to try to keep T-Core because it's the
Yeah.
complete opposite of what she has said in the past. Um, Cam says, T-Core wanted me on the block this week. And MJ's like, yeah, T-Core wants us both gone, both Cam and me. And Chelsea's like, well, I mean, I think T-Core wants Angela gone. No, I mean, that's what she said to me. But I don't know. Maybe she's lying to me, I guess, because I'm close to you guys. I don't know this, but that's what I've heard. And MJ's like, no, no, yeah, that everyone knows. Everyone knows T-Core's coming after me and Cam. So not a lot of progress. It did feel to me like Chelsie was trying to probe a little bit and found very firm walls. There are still a few. Geez, I say a few days. There's still today. So there's still today for Chelsie to try to make some more progress on this. But I don't know how much more she's willing to push because she may feel worried that pushing would put her in a worse position, and she wouldn't necessarily be wrong if she pushes and fails. It could further damage these relationships. Um, but again, like this was the position that she was in. She should have been able to control these two, and it's just not happening.
In like the history of Big Brother Taran, there's been like a very small group of people who I would consider like true manipulators who can mess with your emotions and convince you to do something that is way out of your self interest.
Hmm.
I don't think anyone on this cast is that person. I know I certainly was not that person. When you're making a losing argument, you're trying to convince someone that this is the right move, even though it's very clear that it's the wrong move. You have to ditch logic. You have to go to some other appeal. And I don't think Chelsea's capable of like getting into Cam and MJ's heads. The best thing she could do if she wants to just pursue this, how am I going to strategically convince them angle, is she has to like proactively lie about Rubina. It's the
Yeah.
only way that she can make this happen. But it's that's a hard thing to do in the house. Like we all talk about how valuable it is. There's a reason it happens so infrequently. I think
I
it's
mean,
a really, really go ahead.
I think there are paths here. I think that like ultimately there's usually a few different ways to get a result, right? Like one of them is just the logical debate argument thing that can
Yeah.
happen. If people are genuinely open to both ends, and they feel like it's an open dialogue, you can sometimes just actively convince them that it's the right move using logic. Um, you can also just use the relationships that you have with them to like emotionally manipulate them. Like if you have a really good relationship with somebody, it's usually a lot easier to convince them of things, even if you're not a good manipulator, because you're kind of like cheating using the relationship that you have in terms of like using that manipulation. That is something that I think Chelsie would hope to be using here, but it's not seeming to work. I think she's damaged those relationships a little bit this week, and they're a little bit closed off to that kind of manipulation. So that's not working. Another way you can do it is like the Vanessa route, like you know, just structure things in a way where they feel like they have no choice but to go in that direction. Um, that's nobody's really that player. You have like the Dr. Will, which is like whisper in their ear, like you're the devil, like, hey, this is what's actually good for you. Don't you know that? Do you want to play for other people or do you want to play for yourself? There's stuff like that. There are different ways to do this. I think for Chelsie, a way that she can attempt this is to go to Cam and kind of do that, where it's like, hey, Cam, I know this is good for MJ, but is this good for us? Like, I don't really like, is Leah telling the truth about T-Core wanting you up? Because that really doesn't sound like T-Core to me. I know T-Core's after MJ, but I don't think she's after you. I think there's a way she can make that work. But again, it's hard because she's already done some damage to that relationship. They've already had to have these like conversations about other things. So for her to like get into that mode where she's being like, hey, I'm looking out for you, Cam, is it might be harder to do right now with the time limit that she has of, like, she's got 1 full day left, and they're outside. So that might be difficult. Then, of course, there's stuff that you can do that's not yourself doing it. You can have Ticor do some work for herself. You can lie about Rubina. You can change the way that people see how things are moving. Um, and so I think there's tons of options. But I agree. I think that, like, can she use any of them? Essentially, is, I think, the question right now.
Yeah, I love the idea of because seemingly T-Core might protect Cam. There's a world where that logic makes sense to Cam. The problem is, I think Chelsie has lost objectivity when it comes to MJ. Like, if Chelsie goes to Cam and says, actually, I think MJ is manipulating you, Cam might hear a different side of that than, oh, she's trying to strategically protect me.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think, again, that's why it was like, I really feel like a huge part of Chelsea's loss of influence this week, if she's unable to turn this back around, has been through this Cam MJ stuff. It was so unfortunate for her game at
Yeah.
this time. Um, so she does work on MJ after the conversation with Cam. She talks more about Leah and being wary of Leah. And MJ, similar reaction to when Leah's talking about Chelsie. Like, yeah, it's not, I don't disagree, but hey, I don't think we need to worry about Leah. Like, I think that Rubina is probably willing to put Leah up. She was talking about Leah. Like, I don't think that Leah needs to be a priority for us in the same way that she was telling Leah that Chelsie doesn't need to be a priority for them. This is exactly what you want to be doing if you are playing with two allies that are against each other, is that you want to prevent them from going after each other without actually, like, mending their relationship. It's a if it's a great balance to be holding if you're capable of doing it. We'll see if MJ is actually capable of preventing Chelsie from targeting Leah next week if the opportunity arises. But um, you know, uh, I like that she's attempting it.
Yeah, I think it's very tricky at this point in the season because I don't know how much more this Chelsea MJ connection can stand because they're at odds in this vote, theoretically. Say T Core goes. Next week, they're probably at odds again of who they want to target. And eventually, I think they need to recognize you're probably each other's biggest comp threat, at least. Strategically, you want completely different things. Maybe one of them is going to win, the other's going to get fifth place, and both of them are okay with that gamble. I don't think they're thinking that deep. But like, at a certain point, you can't be allies if you are always fighting in other directions.
Yeah, I mean, that is a problem. They also talk about the Cam situation a bit. Chelsea explains it, at least, in a certain light. Basically saying that it's she understands. Chelsea's not actually mad about it at all. She's just
Mhm.
concerned for their games because Leah keeps talking about it. Like, Leah won't shut up about it, and, like, Chelsie knows that it's all platonic and that it's not a big deal, but it is a big deal for other people like Leah. And they're just talking about it a lot, and so Chelsea's just concerned for their games, and that's why she was upset.
Yeah. Felt like MJ was a camera the way she was just like lying to the thing. I would say MJ did a great job in this conversation. I think MJ saying like, "I'll shut it down," like that's so annoying. Like again, she drops the "I treat him like a brother," which is hilarious. But this this dynamic between the two of them, I think it's so transparent to both of them what is happening. But they're both playing nice, and I think the real like danger between these two or like the signs that this relationship is deteriorating is when they talk about their ideal final fives, Taryn.
Mm,
And there's no way either of these people want this ideal final five of I think it was like Leah, Chemo, Rubina,
mhm.
and then the three of them. And I'm like, okay, they're both BSing each other because I think MJ did a good job of convincing even me, Taryn. I don't know about you, of like, who is MJ's final two? I don't know necessarily. Maybe she doesn't have one. She's down with everybody.
Well, that's the thing, is that, I do think she was locked into a final 2 with Chelsea prior to this week. I really do.
Mhm.
Um, However, I think this week has opened her eyes a little bit, both in terms of, like, where she stands in her relationship with Chelsea, but also in, like how Chelsie is somebody that could win in the end. She's had those conversations with Leah about like, hey, Chelsea's somebody that could really, win a jury vote, and that's concerning. So I don't actually know where MJ is leaning with her final two selection right now. Um, I don't know if she knows, to be honest. I think that she's mostly focused on like what's in front of her, which is this excellent position she's found herself in because of Leah's HOH. And I think she's kind of got some potential options. She could stick with Chelsie. I think that would be a mistake. She could go with Cam and see how that plays out. I don't think she's a definite loss to Cam, but I do think it would be tricky. She could try with Leah, and I think she has a good shot against Leah, but you have to worry about the Quinn fluence. Um,
Can I talk about that for a second, Taran? Because I feel
yes.
like this is something I heard all the time on podcasts, something I believe myself before going into the house.
Mm,
The four-person of the jury has a
yeah.
lot of influence, right? On our season, it was Cam, so let's put that aside. Um, I disagree, and I have a small sample size. I was only on one jury, and the
Mhm,
reason I disagree is because that person has no information about what happened in the rest of the game. On
mhm,
my season, at the very least, those with the most influence, weirdly enough, were Blue, America, Suri, who came in fifth, sixth, seventh, because they're the ones who come in with the information of what we missed. So they're able to frame whatever happened in their own perspective. Suri was a massive part of, she came in calling Matt a coward and Jag a mastermind. And we have nothing to do other than take her word for it because all we see are some competitions and ceremonies. American Blue come in with the same narrative. So if Quinn is sitting in jury trying to convince, let's say, Chemo, who gets fifth place, here's what you should do, I think that's going to fall a lot more flat than Chemo coming in saying, wow, Cam has really taken this game by the horns. So I think that is just something we have to like flip a little bit because it makes so much logical sense. Whoever's in the jury first is going to set the tone. But in reality, that person is almost most unaware of the game going on and most susceptible to influence.
I completely agree. The idea that like being there first means anything beyond being there first, I don't think means much. I think that this came from a lot of especially 9-person juries, where uh, like half the jury knew nothing about the last
Yeah.
month and a half of the game, um, and oftentimes the first couple of people there would start forming voting blocks in the
Sure.
jury themselves and making like alliances in the jury, like Cody being in there and making a pact against Paul and stuff like that, right? So think that's a lot of where it comes from. I think also like on Survivor it might matter more. I'm not sure. But I agree. I think like being there first doesn't really matter much. It's I think especially in a 7-person jury and especially in Big Brother where you are getting more information. However, I do still think that the people that tend to be the most influential on the jury are people that were really well liked in the house. Even if they didn't weren't trusted, or like were targeted, somebody like Quinn, a lot of people really liked Quinn. And even now in the house, they're like, man, we miss Quinn. He's always hyping us up, like making us feel better, so positive. Like the house kind of a lot more negative without Quinn around.
Mhm.
Reminding me of somebody like Michael, who was very influential in the Big Brother 24 jury because he goes in there very well liked, very well respected as a player. Um, and so his opinion carries a lot of weight. I think the same is going to be true of Quinn. I think that like a lot of people are going to be very happy to see Quinn. The energy is going to be so different than it was in the house. And they're going to be like happy to hang out with him, happy to talk with him and hear his thoughts on the game. He's a much bigger fan than most of them are. And he's going to have a lot of strong opinions on what it means to be playing a good game. And so I do think he will have some influence. The question is, would he have enough influence to overturn, say, like a T core, who may also have some influence? And that's where things get a little trickier.
The last thing I want to talk about jury management wise is people are so captivated by this idea of we're going to have a trio in jury potentially, and they're all going to be voting together. First of all, I think that's extremely unlikely because one or two of these trio members are going to get like fourth or third, which means they're not going to get to interact basically with the jury members at all. Maybe one of them at the round table. So like there's going to be less opportunity for groupthink in general because of that. And also, based on what we've seen of T-Core, I don't imagine she's about to go in the jury and start campaigning. It just seems super it seems super unlikely. And I don't think there's two types of people who go into the jury. There's Cory, who goes in and is trying to talk to Cam for 2 days about what happened in the game and trying to figure out all the alliances. And there's people like Suri, who locks herself in her room and watches movies. And I think T-Core is definitely more in that second category. So like, I don't think there's going to be a voting block of 3 people in the jury. I think there's much more outcomes than we think from the outside. And I just feel like people are speaking a little bit too definitively about that.
People should never talk definitively about juries.
Yeah.
So,
Tell me about it.
So, yes, they, so yeah, we'll see what happens. I don't really know. Obviously, the best person to sit next to for anybody is Angela right now, but even that is not like the biggest slam dunk in the world, like it would be on other seasons at the moment, because she has some of the most amount of comp wins of anybody in the house. And quite frankly, some of the more like impressive comp wins of anybody in the house, considering she won. You might say it was a crapshoot, the first HOH that she won, but it was still against a lot of other people. And then she won another HOH early on that was against a lot of people, and then won this veto recently against 6 other people. Whereas some others in the house are counting AI arena comp wins when they were up against 2 other people, which is like you're like you could sit there and do nothing and still have a 33% chance of winning that.
You know how confusing it's going to be? MJ's going to be like, I have 7 comp wins. I won the power competition and then 2 AI arenas, a veto, an HOH, Jenky's veto. Like, I think, again, for the record books, if someone broke the comp record this season, we'd have a lot of debates.
We need more of those. All right. Well, anything else to bring up here, Cory?
No, despite this week being a mess feeds wise, like, you know how you have the 2 cameras, you could BB viewer, listen to one here, one. I could hear all of them all the time. So this feature is not useful.
Yeah.
But the game's been very interesting for this few people left in the house. I'm super satisfied with how much game talk we have, and I think today is not going to disappoint either.
Yes. They did do a dance for Chemo's birthday. There was some drama over the Chemo birthday decorations, and stuff like that. But the main thing to look out for today, of course, is where does Chelsie go with this information that the house is now against T-Core? Will she try to get into Cam's ear individually? Will she bring this to T-Core? Will she give T-Core some tips to try to get back into place? Or will she just accept this and have it go through? Those are the primary questions on my mind. Will T-Core on her own go ahead and have that conversation with Cam, which I think could be vital to keeping her around?
Also, Taran, you did see, like, I think it is kind of important to note T-Core's strategy right now in terms of like how she's going to pitch, because she's going full emotional appeal.
Yes.
She's gonna reveal her crocheting business to Cam and talk about how she has so much more to give and so much more story, and she's more. I don't hate the idea. I feel like every time T-Core talks to someone about her like personal life, they just feel horrible about doing anything bad to T-Core. So while I would love, like, you know, the game analysis, tell me why it's better for your game to keep me. I think this has a shot of working, especially when the logical appeal isn't that logical.
Well, it always does, because and I think part of what makes T-Core effective, because I think a lot of people are struggling to figure out why T-Core is so effective socially when she's not a very social person. She's one of the most introverted,
Yeah.
good social players you've seen in a while, right? And it's so a lot of people are like, why? Like, how? How does this work? I think part of it is this emotional appeal. And a lot of people, when doing an emotional appeal like this, they'll focus on like their story, like T-Core does sometimes. They'll focus on like why you should feel bad if you get rid of me, that like I deserve this. And like all of those things are there in what T-Core is pitching. But she does still have this tinge of strategy, which is that like I am sharing this with you, and that makes you special to me. And if you are special to me, then you're not just feeling bad for me. You're not just feeling like, oh, I like Tikor. You're also feeling like Tikor might actually be good for my game. Like I'm special to her. Like that she will protect me in the game. She flipped a house to keep Rubina. Like she is somebody that will actively protect the people that are special to her. And if she's sharing these things with me, then I am one of those people. And I think that's a huge part of what makes Tikor effective in the strategic social realm of things, where a lot of other people in this position or not. And even when she's like not talking to people a lot of the time and all of this stuff, she's still able to make these connections and bonds. Obviously, there are big flaws in how Tikor plays the game. That's why she's in the position she's in right now, or at least part of why. If I'm trying to nail down like what does make her effective in the times that she is, I think that's a big part of it. Is that it still has that strategic element. It's not purely social, even though it appears to be on the outside.
It's the unwavering power of personal game information, Taran.
Exactly. Personal game information. All right. Well, that's what we have for you today. I will be back tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Eastern to update you on everything that happens today on the Big Brother 26 live feeds, including what happens here with this vote campaign. Tonight, Marathon Wednesdays are back, and in proper marathon fashion, I will be on Twitch watching the Survivor premiere, 2 hours. You get to hang out with me as we watch Asia on the episode, a 2 hour Survivor premiere, and then after that, after the 2 hours, I'll be continuing as we watch tonight's Big Brother episode, where we see the janky veto and the T-Core nomination and all of that stuff. And then after that, I'll be back here on the podcast to recap all of the Big Brother nonsense. So stay tuned for all of that if you want to hang out with us here tonight. And then, of course, tomorrow morning, I'll be back again. So it's no breaks for me here. Also, The Circle just dropped another batch of episodes. So we've got Circle coverage coming at you. We just put out the Tastemakers, where we talked to Kevin Jacobs about his time with Grace at the TIFF Film Festival. They watched a bunch of movies, have recommendations for good movies that are coming up soon. Lots of fun stuff. Check it all out. Cory, what are you up to?
Well, yeah, it's just you never, as a Big Brother fan, it's always a sad day when you have to watch Big Brother in comparison to Survivor back to back. It's always a tough one to stomach. But yeah, I've got some stuff going on. Patreon.com/AmeriCory. We're doing all of our stuff there. Big Brother 7 rewatch, some other stuff. Just interviewed Cedric. I'm streaming on Twitch, twitch.tv/Cory Wurtenberger. A lot of Big Brother, a lot of Survivor stuff. And of course, announced yesterday, America Tells All, America's new Golden Bachelorette podcast. It's Bachelor podcast, but this season it's Golden Bachelorette. Her first podcast is out. Yesterday, Taran hit #1 on the Apple Podcasts TV chart. So we're moving places, and definitely check it out on Apple Podcasts or RHAP YouTube.
Yes. All right. Well, that is what we have for you then. Thank you all so much for joining us here today. And I will see all of you next time.